waiting us.
Awesome. So we're live. We want to welcome you to our meetup online. This is social distancing, but not distancing, but getting together online, which is really cool. This is our first meetup of its kind, Flutter Devs. So we are super excited to introduce to you Serkan Yusuf. He's a community evangelist from Turkey. He's at GDG Istanbul. He also have a lot of experience working with Flutter. He's been working with Flutter since beta version. And he wants to share some of the ways that you could manage state using Flutter. There's a lot of information that he prepared for us. So I'd like to welcome Serkan. If you could, introduce yourself and say hi to the community.
Okay, hello everyone. It's nice to be here, and also thank all of you to join us today. I am happy to be here and to share you my experience about managing the state on Flutter. So yeah.
Cool. So I'm gonna give you the floor so you could start teaching us a little bit about state management. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Go.
So is my screen is on this live right now, I think. Welcome again. Welcome and thank you to joining us in the States. We locked down in our homes. We found some chances to to take some benefits to the community, taking some presentations only. So what we're gonna talk about today, I'm gonna talk about the multiple ways to manage our state on Flutter apps. But first, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Serkan Yusuf, and I'm a senior Flutter developer working at a company called Automato in Turkey, based in Istanbul. I'm also the organizer and the community member of GDG Istanbul, and we organize events like that. Also at the physically when we are not locked down now, also in live. So today's agenda, what we're gonna talk about today. I'm gonna talk about declarative UI and the state. So what is the declarative UI, what that means, and why it's all about the state. So and then I'm gonna talk about the common ways to manage your state. It's like stateful widgets, some inherited widgets, and provider block products, and some of them. So let's start. So first of all, Flutter is a declarative. So what's the declarative we say? So as if you are familiar with Android of iOS programming frameworks, at their frameworks, when we manage some our components or manage our things, we can do like the thing that set text or set image like that. We're gonna change our component state or our view, our UI like that. But in the declaratives, we cannot do that. So in declarative UI things, like when we want to change our state, we have to rebuild our component, and especially in Flutter, our widget again. So to rebuild it, the widget contains a state. So rebuild it, we have to change its state. So the states thing comes here. So the state is the thing that widget contains, and as you see at the below, when we want to change our state, so we give it our build methods, and it's change, and it become our UI. So our UI is equals the build methods that contains our state. So it's generally all about the state, the managing state across the application, across our screens. So there are the multiple ways to do that, and let's start from the very common one. Also the Flutter framework give us that it's called stateful widget. The stateful widget is the widget that give us opportunity to rebuild itself, and when you like call the set state method, it rebuilds itself, and when you change the values in that, your values changed on the UI. So there are the two classes to implement the stateful widget. When it's the create state class upon the stateful widget, that is extend stateful widget, so our widgets. So the other one, the subclass, is the state class that contains our the widgets state. So when you change the state and set the state, the whole widget rebuilds itself, and the build methods are mutable, and it tells framework when you call the set state, it tells framework to that build method to rebuild itself, and especially it give us to change our UI state. In here, in this example, like when I press the button, I have a method here that sets something, and when I call that method, it contains the set state method itself itself, and inside. So and in set state, I'm changing the something to the nav state, and when I do that, the set state tells the framework that to rebuild the widget, and our my text is here to displaying the something value. It's also changed. So okay, in this case, I can change my widget and rebuild with this own. But how about the changing my state from the another class or from another widget? So we can do that also with a stateful widget. So when you calling your other widgets from inside the stateful widget, and you want to change your value in the upper class, you can give the method also your calling widget, and in this widget you can also call this, and when the button presses, as in the example, it will go to the upper class, and it will say the set state, and our state also change. So in this case, I can change my state from the another class, so it can be changed, and the widget can be rebuilt again. So and also there is a third way, the third thing that we say that is a mix and match approach. And this is the special scenario that when you want to change the state of the upper class and the upper widget and the widget itself. So in this example, there are two widgets, and both of them are stateful widgets. They contain state, and when you call the state from the second widget, and it also change its state, and also the upper widget state. So in this case, I can change my all over UI from the using the one widget. So I can access the state of the upper widget and also to my widget. So what about the accessing the widget in the much bigger app? So imagine that you have an app that contains a lot of pages, a lot of screens, and when you want to access your state from down to widget tree too far down to the widget tree. Let's say we have a home page and we have settings in our profile page, and I want to change something, some widget states who are within my home widget, but I want to change it from my profile settings. So when I want to do that, I have to pass my state to all the tree down, and for to access it from the down to the leaf in my widget. So to do that, yeah, I have passed my state to the down. So when your applications go bigger, it takes harder to do that and manage your state. So in this case, we can say that stateful widget is okay. It's building with itself and some other widgets, but not too far. But accessing state from the far is not possible. Not much easier, and it's gonna be like much more complicated when the applications get bigger. And the updating on change is not possible in this case. So how we can do that? It also Flutter framework give us a chance that to do that with a widget called inherited widget. So to use that, I have to extend my value class with an inherited widget. So it have to contain that override method. The update should notify to update the value and that say the framework that the value has changed and it's not equals the old value. And also it have to state have to contain the context, and for that we have the inherited from widget on extract type method that it's a static and it contains our context. So to use that, I have to declare my widgets the up like and the upper state of my the upper way on my widget tree, like, and set the value, and at the down I can express my all widget tree and like write all my widget tree below down. And to use the inherited widget whenever I want, in which widget I want, I can call my inherit widget value like the class and give it the context and like take the value. So in this way, I can reach my value from the down leaves of my widget tree. And yeah, when we say my inherited widget, my value, I want to keep it here and I want to reach it from the downside. I can access it with this way. So yeah, it's a like much more easier to passing the state to the downside to access it, and it's not so much complicated. So in this case, I can access the state, I can update on change, but changing the state itself, it's like a little complicated and it's not give me the okay thing. So what's the next, what's the perfect way to do that? Like when you say you have a, like in this example, in this case, we have a like cart value, the cart model at the top of my tree, and I want to access it from my list item, and when I'm gonna change it, I want to change also my list item value, and it notifies my list item value. And when I go to the my chart widget, my chart page, it also I want to see the change value in this page, in the screen. So in that case, I have the method called provider. Also, it's a scope. It's a like started scope model, and then become like provider. It's by the community. There is the library called provider, and yeah, it's take the things much easier to change my state all over the application. So when you're using especially the provider, you have to know the some of things. Some of we have a glossary here. So we have the change notify thing. So it's a class that our model have to extend to it, and to change the values to notify the things. So when you want to change a value, and when you after changing it, when you want to other classes will observe that value. When you want to notify, you have to say notify listeners to say other widgets that that value has changed. So to do that, we have to extend your class from the change notifier. So now we have a model that contains our value, and I can change it, and I can say the other widgets that it has been changed with notify listeners, and I can notify my other widgets. And for to do that, to like express the call other widgets in my widget tree that contains the value. I have to wrap my tree with a change notify provider that it give me like taking the context, the top of the tree, and the widgets below that context can reach my model, my provider, and can notify within the changes. So after I wrap my tree with and change notify provider, in wherever I want to notify them my value, I can wrap my widgets with consumer widget, who takes my model, my value class, and and also gives me a builder method with contains context to give a context, a model that gives us that model, my model, and it gives us like a chat that especially is not using as much, but yeah, it's an optional chat. And when I do that, I can like notify my value and observe my value, like model that my items by calling it. So when I notify it, when I change it, it also automatically changes in my widgets that consume it. So and to the other way also to call and the take my provider, my model, and the change it also observe it. It's the other way is the provider of thing, and when you want to call like in your widget context, when you want to reach your model, also you can describe as a provider of that model, and it gives you a context, and you can like call the methods and change the things, like accessing your methods. Like in this case, I access my add method, and I give it an item that gonna change it, and it automatically change and notify listeners, and who the widgets who consume that item automatically changes. But in this case, I have something. Because when I call the notify listeners every time, my whole widgets that listening that value, it's automatically rebuilds. But also my given widget who changes, who having the provider model, it also rebuilds itself. So imagine that we have a list item, and every time I click the list item to change the value, it rebuilds also the list itself, but it's not observing the value. To avoid that, you can say the listen false, and it's not listen when you not want to observe or not want to reach the value in the given class, in the given widget. So in this case, but when you not telling the listen false thing, and your widget is gonna rebuild itself. So whenever it's not also the observing that value. So in this case, I can accessing the state, updating the state, and also can change the state, but somehow I can have the minimum rebuilds. But because imagine you have to observe that value, but you don't want to rebuild the widget every time the change you made a change, but also you need to observe it from an inside widget. So in this case, you cannot do the listen false and true thing every time. So it give us not reach the minimum rebuild time. So to do the minimum rebuild time, there is a more specific two things, two libraries we have here. One of it's called block, and it's also the most common, I think the most common way, the architecture that it uses in Flutter, inside the Flutter developers that when developing apps. So the block is the business logic component that is like the layer is between my presentation, like the UI components, and with my in my backend, or the repository, like the models class. So blocks give me like manage my state with events, but also I can manage my states with that events, and I want and with that way I can rebuild my UI whenever the state changes. So with this way I can change my UI and with minimum rebuild times that using it very specially. So, but we have to know about such common words about the block. So the events, like the what I say, the that the things, that the actions that gives me and to trigger the block to change the states. So the states are the outputs of the block that whenever I give the event to the block, it tells to the state to change the state, or also the takes the value and change the state of the value of the model. And whenever the state change, my UI rebuild itself what the state is. So in this case, I can say my state that the thing is loading, that you can should show the user the loading progress, and when the state change the and when the value comes from backend and the state change to the load, you can show the user that the value, and it changed automatically, and the events that after called the map to event state. So it's a special method that give us to stream our events, our states to the widgets. So we have in this case we have like the supervisor block. that it's some especially a class when you want to delegate multiple blocks in your app, more than one block in your app, you can uh, take the class the block supervisor, and it delegates the block delegate, and the block delegate takes all the blocks and delegates by the block supervisor. So what's the things happening here? Let's see. So I have events that like the actions. We say the callback methods, like I say the enums, do the thing, do the other thing. Like when you press the button, do this thing, and when you press the other button, do the other thing. Like, and I have a my block that gets my value, the initial state. Every block has to have the initial state, because when you want to call your block without initializing, without giving it some value, it mustn't give you a null or empty value, and in this case you have to have some initial state in your block. So and when you call to the case, the action thing, it goes to the map to event state. That transitions go to your map to event state, and when you do your actions in the switch case thing, you take your actions, you take your event, and in the case your event is this, like in the case our event is do the thing, it returns us our current value, like the -1, and for the other event it give us the current value +1 thing, and it change the state and return us value depending the state. So in my main thing, in my widget, like I can express it like the I can call it like the final my block, and I can dispatch my events, like my event that do the thing, do the other thing, and when you do that, your event like trigger the map to event state, and it it streams you a value, and it change the state, and when you change the state, you have a new value or new widget that rebuild it, and it gives me like rebuild my widget whenever I want, and I cannot rebuild it before giving it the past state of the widget, because it always takes the previous state of the widget, and it gives you the next state of the widget. So with that way, I can manage my state, my UI, whenever I want and whenever I want. So, and change the my values in my block, also in my body. Yeah. So in this case, block is giving me the accessing state, the updating the state, the changing the state as well, and it gives me minimum rebuilds. So whenever I want to rebuild my widget without like containing the value, it can rebuild itself, and also the other widgets with the minimum rebuild count. The other thing that give us that opportunity, that having the state all over the app, is Redux. Redux is the application architecture that coming from the React and React Native world, also especially from JavaScript world, and in it's the common use, common architecture to manage the state in the reactive framework. Like when we say reactive frameworks, it's a React Native, like it's reactive framework, and The framework also is the reactive framework. So in Flutter, we have a Flutter Redux to manage that thing. So with Redux, I can keep my wool application state in my place that it called store. And whenever I change my application state, it needs a dispatch an action like it in block, we can say, and also the block taking the state and new state is created and given the widgets. It's also the same as here, the dispatch and action. In block we have an events, but in Redux we have we call it actions. So dispatch an action, and it gives me a new state created, and it that rebuilt my widget. And we have reducers. We call things the reducers here, and they are the pure functions that take the previous state of your widget or value, and it gives you and returns you new state depending on your action. So in the application circle, the architecture circle, I have a view, and when I say take the action, it called the reducers to take the action, and reducer take the action and take the previous state, and tells the state that returns a new state and that change its state, and the state gives us a new view, and it keep going on all over the architecture. So for the usage, yeah, I have actions to return the return state. I have we have control over the state. Like also you can control over state, means like the state is not in your application, is over your application. So you have a control all over the application state in one place. And you have a pure reducer functions, like it's also easy to test, like the widget testing, also the like the testing, the Flutter testing, like, and you have an applications clearly structured, because every feature have its own actions, own reducers, and own containers. So when you have to add any feature in your application, you just simply can describe any action, any reducer for that, and just simply add the container and give the container in which page you want, and it's done. And yeah, it's a great, we can say it's a great architecture for most complicated and most bigger apps, for most bigger apps, because when your app getting bigger, it's hard to manage your state. Okay, provider needs you, gives you a state management thing with change notifier, but when the things getting complicated, like the repository services and all over the stuff, the thing is getting complicated, and you have to manage it more sufficient way, and the Redux is one of them. So in here we have a model that called our model, like my item. It's like the immutable, and like when it's called when it's gets some null or empty value, it automatically get its previous value. So in this case, we can't have any empty or null state of my model. So we have actions here that inputs to change the state, like events in the block, like you can describe an action, and you can give it your model, and your action is like describe your change your value. And we have reducers here. So first of all, you have to describe your actions in your reducers, like it takes your model and your dynamic action, whatever it is, and depending on your action, it returns you like newly changed, created state. So when you say do that action, and it like gives you like the or whatever you want to change in your state. So in Redux, to use like to use Redux in our app, we have to express it and give it in your upper uh, upper tree on our app, like creating our store, and give it its reducers in it, and give it also a initial state, because initial state are mass, and when you not having a value to give to the store, but you have to call it somehow. You have to it have to gives you returns you not empty or null thing. So the initial states are masked, and with the store you can run your application, and in your application you have a store provider. To store provider, it class like widget to give us the change to chance to take our store, and also our model, and with that store our application or our tree have especially that store, and it can use its actions and its reducers. So in my widget, as you can see, I can call the store connector, and it's a other widget that we can call our store, like we provided the upper side, and it gives me an item, and also the newly created an old and new value, and with the content converter, it give me a state, and with this way I can take my value and to shows the user. And also for the especially of the Redux, I have the such a architectural things when I want to store my widgets that keeps like my store provider, like has the store connectors. I can describe it as connect containers, and I can put it in my applications architecture like containers, all the containers in there, and I can use them whenever I want in my page or in my application. And when you have the asynchronous things in your architecture, you can use the middleware class. Like you can describe all the reducers and the actions there, like to use it asynchronous way. So also when you want to, it's by also this thing is by also reading the value, and you want to change the value on in your model. To store connector, you can give not the to newly created thing, but you can give it the type def that you typed below, like a function. You can give it, and when you call it, it can access. You can access also the store, and when you access the store and dispatch that action you give, it gives you a new state. It creates you a new state of your model. I didn't change here. Sorry about that. But in Redux, we have a accessing state. Yep. updating changes, all the things, and minimum rules is okay. Also, Redux is giving me the testable and maintainable and having state all the time. I not put it in my slides, but there is something called the time traveler in Redux, and it's an library that you can add your application and use. It's a helper library that gives you opportunity to take your state from the beginning to the end the state. Like you can see all the states that changes over time, and you can go to the back to the 5 state behind, and you can see what's the state of the value and what was now, and you can manage all the state of your application from the one store. So the next thing we have here is Mobix. Mobix also the architecture that have in reactive world the other languages and frameworks, and it's newly came to the Flutter world, to the Flutter framework, and with Mobix. I have something different to manage my state, like with annotators, but it takes the thing so easy to manage. So I have a field like observable annotation, like that I can take upon my values in my models that makes them observable. So also I have a computed annotation that when I want to compute something in my model and I want to notify the UI what is the computation completes or sustains. So I can use the computed annotation to observe also the value and change the UI whenever the state give me the value. So I have also the user interface trivial logic, like call to action, like when I have to change something and I have a method in my model, I can describe it as putting the annotation action topic. And in this case, I have observables, I have actions and reactions. The observables are our fields, like we put it in our model. And when I call to the actions, it mutate the observables. And when the observables are changed, it notifies to reactions. And the notifies and reactions is notifying our UI, and the UI reviews and changes. And also when I can change the action again, and the circles is going on to change my state all over the app. So let's look at it. So in Mobix, I describe my model classes like private and also with store parameter. I give it with store parameter that its method comes from the Mobix library, and I have to tell it like to be an abstract class, and to generate on also the Mobix is like doing that magic with generating some boilerplate code in behind, and to generate that boilerplate code you have to describe your class name like .g.dart, like, and when you call your build runner to build your work, and it generates all the boilerplate code. It depends on your model, and then you can describe your generated counter, like it's always generated like with the private dollar thing, and you can describe your new class with your private class and with its generated class, and in your application, all over your application, you reach the that counter class. So in your application, in your widget tree, like simply you can add your counter, like a final counter, like a final model, and to observe your values, you can use the observer widget, and it gives us a builder method, an empty builder method that it returns that as a widget who takes our counter that value that give us also that value that it's observable. And when I call some action like counter that increment, it goes to that action and it increments that value, and the value, when in value change, it automatically notifies the observer that rebuilds our widget in it. So yeah, observers also working with computed reactions very well. So when you have some computed reaction with the state, when the state change in your computed thing, it also comes to your UI and reveals the UI what the state is. So in this case, I have like some state with initial loading and loaded methods. And to use that state, I have a computed. I have a state in my model that annotated with computed, and in that computed, I have some feature for waiting to some change, and when the feature state is like changed, like reacted, it can give us the initial state, or where the when the feature states like change with pending or loading, like loaded, it give us the other stating to our model. And in my observer thing, I can like simply get my state in my widget. So when the state changes, it automatically observe our state and change it itself. So conclusion, I can say that you cannot you do not hesitate to use stateful widget when it's necessary, because it's not must that your all the applications to have an architecture like block or Redux or provider, something like that. When your applications are has a minimal screens, like a couple screens, or is a like small applications, you can use stateful widget to manage your state in your app, necessarily small apps. But when the applications like getting some bigger and you want to have a completed architecture in your application, you can use the scope model of provider to manage and your UI to your state. And when the things getting bigger, I think you can use the block, because it gives you very special state changing things with its events, and it's fully recommended to use block or Redux for bigger apps. I can say, and Redux and also the block, it's fully recommended to control and handle your events and actions, and test them whenever it's necessary. So it's the best way to manage your state in the bigger size application, and also test it. So, and the Mobix is newly lightweight the library that you can use, and also it can manage your state as well with auto-generated and boilerplate code, but also it can be very well testable when it's needed. and it also it can be used with smaller size or also bigger size applications, and it depends on your needs, I think. And for resources, I use the like the state management approaches in Flutter side, some medium blocks, the Felix Angelos block for block architecture, and Risocoders block for Mobix. And at HackerNoon, I use the Redux block for how to manage our states. And there is a site, also the GitHub repository called Flutter Samples, built by Brian Egan. And I highly recommend it to go and look at it, because it contains all the state management approaches and state management architectures you can use in your Flutter apps, and you can go and see the other options in there. So yeah, if you have some questions, I will be very appreciated to answer them. So also I am looking at the live chat on the YouTube. To Leroy Hustle, I think it has some question about the SQLite. I think I'm reading it from the live chat below here, and it says that it has some errors about the static methods that uses in SQLite. But truly, I can say that I never used SQLite in my Flutter apps. For storing the data, I use Hive, and I have recommended to the Hive, the library called Hive, and you can use it as well. And it's very simple. It's not it's not SQL based, it's NoSQL based database, but it can you can simply manage your and store your data in there, and I recommend that one. And I have not an experience about the SQLite as well. So Robert,
so I have a question. Do you what's your experience with Redux, and have you experienced Redux and Block? Like I have used Block. I feel very comfortable with Block, but
yeah, everyone says that to me. I hear it so many times that block is very complicated, because every time you have an action, you have to want to change your state. You have to create a class for events, a class for states, and class for your block, and you have to manage your things within the three-way object, and it looks some complicated, but in the bigger apps, I think it helps you much more to manage your state. And sorry.
No, I found that it's very verbose. Like when I see people using like Provider or some other state management is not as verbose, and there's tons of like I guess blocks about how to organize your code so it doesn't look like too complicated, but it's still I don't know, for whatever reason I feel comfortable understanding block, and I use it in multiple projects. But I do agree that it's like a lot of over engineering going on.
Yeah, especially the think of the other developers is the same. Yeah, everyone says you have to write much more code when you use your block, but yeah, you can. Yeah, the thing is, you can manage your state very especially and unique in the block. But yeah, you can either, you do it as well with provider because everyone says it's much more simple to use.
Okay. I think there's a few questions in the chat. How does block minimize rebuilds? Um,
Uh, but because of your states and when you have some states like uh, what I told in Mobix, like imagine that we have some states like loading, loaded, and rejected, and the same thing in the block. Like when you have that state, and you can manage your states with your events, and it can be change your state, and you can observe your state and change your UI with that. And yeah, uh, I am saying that it's minimizing rebuilds because like the widget not rebuild itself every time you like calling your action. Because in provider thing, when you call your notified listeners and not say like listen false, the widget rebuilds itself also. But in block, it's not a this thing, and it use not notify listener or change notifier in the background. It use streams, and for that streams and the widget, the value has streamed always upon your state, and when your state and value change, it's streamed to your uh, like to your widget. And in also in particular way in Google engineers saying that you can use and manage that with RX, and using the Flutter streams and stream builder, you can manage also as well with that way. But I think the block uh, doing the same thing, like using streams behind and doing it as well.
yeah, I think also the key thing to kind of minimize rebuilds is to have your state management of your provider or block as close to the widget that needs it. So if you put it like all the way top on the widget tree, then you're making kind of going through the tree uh, all the way up to come all the way down. So usually what I try to do is I keep it as close to what I need it to, um, just one level above, if that makes sense.
And they asked about the database library, and it's called Hype. I can find it from the pub dev. Uh, if you mind a minute for me,
I could
and
find
I
it.
can share it. Yeah, I can do it also. So no problem. Hype, and yes. Oops. Okay.
Yeah, I put the link there.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah. I think that's all.
Oh, so the library. So I posted a library that says, "Oh, I think it's Hive." Okay, you answer that question because
Yeah.
you said
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. I answered that one.
All right, awesome.
I
So
think I think we done here. Also, I wanna thank you to give me a chance to express myself and share my knowledge here. Thank you so much as Flutter Devs community. And if you have some questions, you can write me from Twitter or mail me whenever you want. I try to do my best and answer your questions as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Serkan, and we really appreciate sharing with that community. Um, and it was really good. We learned a lot. I certainly have to go back to the video to pick up some of the Redux stuff because I haven't played around with that. Um, I want to share with the community like upcoming events. So we have next month we're going to be talking about working with asynchronous in Flutter. We want to have another speaker. The amazing thing of kind of staying home and doing these things remotely is that you are really far away from us, and I apologize for the time difference. uh, but next month we're gonna be sharing some knowledge with another speaker. He's in Mexico, I believe. Um, but this is great. So I'm gonna try to bring more speakers, local and from everywhere that could share the knowledge. And this is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Serkan. One last question. Somebody posted, do you have tutorials on how? Do you have a link to that? Maybe share.
I I don't have any tutorials for done myself, but I think the Reso coder has one with how to implement Hive in your project. You can go to the Reso coders blog at that site, and you can find the Hive how to implement the Hive in your project, because it becomes some other two libraries to implement with some rebuild for some to rebuild your boilerplate code behind, and for some to use it, and you can find it there, I think.
Okay. Thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone. And thanks for.
Thanks. Goodbye.
All right. Bye bye.